Hello, hello. I think we are live. Scott DeWitt here from the campus of Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio in the United States. And I am joined with my colleagues. Say hello, Ben.
Hi, everybody. This is Ben. I'm just up the road in my basement because it looks like it's going to rain. So I didn't think about it was a good idea to come onto campus.
We are here to have a conversation about a little bit about what we saw happening in Module 2, but mostly about Module 3, the visual PSA. We have some questions that have come into us and some advice we have for you. Our goal here is to keep these office hours as concise as possible. We know you have a lot of material to cover for this module, so we want to keep this video as short and concise as possible. And Ben, where do you think we should start today? Any thoughts?
Well, we have a small handful of questions and feedback we've gotten from people, so maybe we could go through that because I think it addresses issues that are germane to the whole of the course, and then we could drill down into the assignment after that.
Perfect.
So one thing I've seen in the discussion forums, we've gotten some general feedback that people appreciate the reminders that we send out via email. So thanks for that. If you have suggestions for other ways you'd like us to convey information to you, if you have ideas for revision and etc., we'd love to hear from you. We're always interested in learning how to refine courses like this for the future. Be sure to check your email and Canvas as well, because that's another channel that we're getting information from you from.
Yeah, I think that with this course, there are a lot of discussion forums. Most of them are associated with the assignments themselves and the modules, but there are discussion forums that are about the course in general. There's a discussion forum for tech support, so we really want to encourage you to think about using some of those other discussion forums. And remember that if you see a question that somebody has posted and you know the answer, jump in. This is a community of learners here. You don't have to wait for one of the instructors to answer the question. And if people don't know the answer, we will be keeping an eye on the course and we'll jump in also. We have two email addresses, and one of them is within the Canvas course, as Ben said, and I really want to encourage people to use that email as much as possible because that really catches our attention. We're looking at the course throughout the day, and we get a little notification if an email has come into our inbox there. So that's a really great way. We do have a Gmail account too. We do not check that as much. So if you have written something to the Gmail account and you haven't heard from us, you might want to jump into Canvas and send us a message there. I bet we'll see it much faster.
Another question we've gotten via email, this is through the Canvas email, not so much a question, it's just kind of like a concern about overall the amount of work in a MOOC like this. Something that we're mindful of. We're asking a lot of learners here. So I thought maybe we would address this to some extent. Scott, how do learners deal with the pressure of the various kind of replies and responses and assignments and viewings? How does one make one's way through that if they're kind of pressed for time and attention?
I think one of the things that we might think about is what are the affordances of doing any kind of online class? What does that offer us? And what are some of the limitations? So I think that one of the things that online classes do particularly well is that they let people participate in classes who sometimes don't have regular schedules, or they sometimes have their free time at times when typical classes are not being offered, or they're in different time zones than the people that they're taking classes with. So I think that really paying attention to those moments throughout a week when you have those chunks of time and making sure that you're carving out some of that time to jump into the class, I think that that's a really great way to think about managing the time, but also realizing that one of the limitations sometimes of taking online courses is that, if you're taking a traditional class that meets face-to-face in a what we call the bricks and mortar, like a traditional classroom, you know you have to be there at that time on those days during the week, and you automatically carve that time out of your life. And so sometimes I think online classes are tricky because we don't have a set time when we're meeting, and the next thing you know, the day has disappeared and you haven't logged into the class, or you haven't really thought about the assignment. So I think that it is tough to juggle some of those things, but I think one of my biggest pieces of advice is to, day to day, look at your schedule and figure out, when do I have those chunks of time when I can actually log in, and then making sure that nothing else gets in the way. Maybe that means leaving home, or maybe that means closing a door, or putting on a set of headphones to signal to other people, hey, I'm really busy, I'm working on this class right now. So that would be one strategy that you might think about when you're working on this class.
Right. One thing I notice, having done a version of this course for several times now, is that occasionally learners will decide for themselves what they want to take on and what they don't want to take on. And for example, in this case, I was just reading the discussion forums yesterday, and I noticed one person, I think it was Teresa. Hi, Teresa. Had mentioned that she was considering not doing the module 3 assignment, the visual PSA, but was still offering to give feedback and editorial support for the people who do, which I thought was a really kind of generous a way to still participate and obviously not only add value to the course experience for the people who are doing the assignment, but she herself is getting kind of value out of the experience by virtue of kind of honing her editorial skills, her reviewer skills, which is an idea that we've been trying to press hopefully from the beginning of this course, that reviewing is itself a learned skill that is so valuable and worth practicing.
And I think that, what you and I have both touched on here, Ben, is, we're teaching what we call a MOOC, and that's an acronym. And you and I have both touched on the 2 O's. So the MOOC stands for a massive open online course. So I talked a little bit about some of the affordances and limitations of doing any kind of course online. I think what you're really getting at is what we mean by open. Open, I think, isn't just about everybody can come and take the class, but it's also there's an openness to what the participants want to and what they can participate in, and that it is perfectly okay if you need to step aside for an assignment, or if there's something that isn't fitting your schedule, or maybe there's an assignment that doesn't really appeal to you. It's perfectly fine. This is not a traditional class, and we really take to heart that idea of what an open class should do.
Absolutely.
Let's see about some of the other questions that have come up this week. Oh, I think that we've been getting some questions about how to submit assignments. And so I think that there are a couple of things we could talk about here today. We won't go through the specifics of how to submit an assignment. I do want to let you know that in the assignment prompts themselves, there are instructions for how to submit assignments. And these instructions might change from module to module in terms of what we're asking you to submit and where we're asking you to submit it. So I think that the first thing I would say is make sure you're looking at the assignment prompt, and there should be instructions there. And sometimes you'll even see a link that will get you to some very detailed instructions with some graphics that will take you through the steps of how to submit an assignment. If you are still confused after that, maybe our instructions weren't so clear, or maybe this is the first time that you've been in this platform, that's a really good place to post something to one of the discussion forums to say, I think I'm ready to submit my assignment, but I'm a little confused on how to do that. And I think that you'll find lots of people who will chime in and will help you do that. And we'll keep an eye on those questions as they come up. So far we've asked you to submit assignments to discussion forums, and that has been a way for you to share your work publicly with all of the people in the class. With this next module, we're actually going to ask you to submit to what is actually called an assignment Dropbox in Canvas. And we have instructions for you how to do that. The reason we're going to ask you to do that is that this will be the first assignment where we actually ask you to participate in a more structured peer review. And we're going to be able to use Canvas to do that, so that after you submit an assignment, then you will get some of your classmates' assignments that you will be able to review for them and provide them some feedback. And so we're going to use a slightly different way of submitting work. The instructions are on the assignment prompt. I do want to review some of those due dates. So, and I think we'll talk a little bit about the assignment itself too here in a moment. But that assignment is due on June 30th. As soon as everybody turns in their assignments, then you will start to receive assignments to review. And we're going to ask you to do some peer review. Those peer reviews are due on July 2nd. And then we're going to ask you to write a reflection of what that process taught you. What was it like reviewing other people's work? And what did you learn about your own writing, your own composing by doing that work? And that reflection then is due on July 3rd. And so there are instructions for turning in all of that work. Then I'm wondering if maybe we should talk a little bit about, there's also been some questions about, you know, why would we ask students to do a visual PSA in what appears to be a writing class? I think that it's important that we note that we've actually been calling this a composing class. We've been using that word composing so that we're talking about thinking about communication in many different forms. But I'm wondering if maybe you and I could talk a little bit about why we're even asking students to do an assignment like this.
Absolutely. Well, you know, one reason I think we came up with an assignment like this is because it's kind of something we're used to doing in our brick and mortar situation. Scott and I, Kay, some of the former faculty who've since moved on, have a strong background in digital media composing. And with that comes this recognition that writing is changing in the digital era. As Scott mentioned the term affordances before. Once you write on the computer, suddenly it opens up a whole new realm of possibilities. It doesn't have to be just alphabetic text. We can mix in visuals, whether they're still or moving. We can mix in audio. We can mix in, interactivity in ways that traditional print doesn't allow for. And once you start engaging those tools and those aspects, new rhetorical considerations emerge. And so if one of the main goals of a course like this is to get you thinking more broadly and comprehensively about what rhetorical expression is all about, then I think it's important to kind of at least dip our toes into these waters.
Yeah, and I think that it's a really great time to emphasize that this is not a graphic design class. And so I think students really want to produce work that, they put a lot of pressure on themselves sometimes. Like, I want to design this beautiful poster. And I think I want to say that, that's a great goal, especially if you do have some design background or you're a visual artist. But I think that for this assignment, for the purpose of this class, we've put this in here for that kind of the extension of thinking about rhetoric. There's another way to think about rhetoric. And so I also want to say that if you're not a designer, you're not an artist, I would fall into that category. I might actually do a lot of the assignment with some paper and markers and some crafts or something, and design something that in the end, I get my phone out and I take a picture of, and turn, that I think, but I would be considering all of those different kinds of affordances, and I'd be thinking about audience and ethos and logos and pathos, all of those rhetorical considerations that have been part of the first two modules would become a part of what I was doing with this assignment. And I think that's really what's key about this.
This reflects a lot of the activity that you see in professional settings. We're talking about a deliverable that is something you see in the real world, public service announcement. So nonprofits and even corporate entities and and a host of other kind of organizations create these kinds of texts, and they don't do it in isolation. Lone designers don't create these things. They're often the result of a lot of people with different areas of expertise weighing in, whether it's massaging the language, whether it's thinking about how it fits and aligns with the brand of the organization. And certainly, you know, the design element does come in there. But I want to reiterate what Scott says, which is you don't have to be a professional graphic designer to develop a concept. So even if it's not up to the standards of what you imagine in your mind, there's still an opportunity to engage in that collaborative process by soliciting feedback from other, you know, other composers in the class. And you know, ultimately, this is what we're trying to do, is trying to replicate the kind of experience where we're engaging with others in the act of creating text in order to make a better world.
And I think that, you know, a former student of mine really taught me a valuable lesson, and that is something that is really rhetorically savvy or rhetorically powerful does not necessarily have to be an elaborate, complex visual design. That sometimes simplicity is often rhetorically very powerful. So this student was telling me, I asked him to do a visual PSA in the class, and he submitted something that, you know, when I first looked at it, I thought like, well, that's kind of simple. Like, you don't seem like you know, let's think a little bit more about the design of all of this. And he was explaining that he was actually thinking of public transportation, and that sometimes when he was in a subway or in a bus, there were PSAs. They were often on the wall of the bus above the window, and they're intended that while you're sitting in the bus trying to get to work or school or wherever you're going, that PSA, one of the affordances of where he is and the time is that that PSA could have a lot of text on it. It could have a lot of information because the person sitting there doesn't really have much else to do or anywhere else to go. You're kind of stuck there on the bus. What he had designed is he was thinking of an argument where he was encouraging people who may be struggling in life to seek some mental health services. It wasn't about a specific doctor. It wasn't about a specific office or practice. It was just a PSA about, if you're having a hard time, it's really important to find some help. And so he designed something very simplistic, and he said, this is what would be, for example, on the side of a bus. So here in Columbus and in a lot of cities, you see PSAs on the exterior of a bus. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that the message, you have to be able to get that message very, very quickly and very concisely, because the bus is driving by you really quickly.
Right.
And so he designed something that, you know, it couldn't have a lot of text. It couldn't necessarily have an image that was going to require me to do a lot of deciphering and a lot of pulling apart of the complexity of that images. It had to be very, very concise and very powerfully rhetorically in doing, but the design had to be very simple, something that I could process in a very short amount of time. And I thought that was a really great analysis of his own work and what he was trying to achieve.
Yeah, there's so many variables with an assignment like this, and some of these you have control over imagining or you know, explaining. So like where this thing will live in the world. You know, is it a conventional commercial? Is it a postcard? Is it, you know, kind of a poster that will be displayed? Where will it be displayed? You know, based on that location will determine who's likely to see it, less or more so. There's a lot of play in a system like this, which to some people makes the world of rhetoric a little frustrating, because there aren't right and wrong answers so much as there are better and worse answers, and there's a lot of space in between, you know, better and worse. So I personally find that freeing and exciting, but I could see how some might find it scary.
Right. And I think that, you know, if you are falling into that camp of being a little anxious about this assignment, there's also another part of the assignment, and that's the artist statement. So as somebody myself who sometimes struggles to make something look beautiful, a freeing part of this assignment would be the artist statement, where in a very, like, I think we're asking for like 300 to 400 words. It's a short document. I would get the opportunity to describe what I'm trying to achieve, who is the audience, what are my goals. So all of that material that we've been thinking about in the class so far, and would allow me to maybe account for places where my design skills may have suffered a little bit in my designs. Some of you out there might be really great designers, and your design skills might be stronger than your written skills. So this is an assignment that you can really rise to the occasion.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that idea that this is the kind of work that may end up having real world impact. You know, a lot of you are passionate about the causes that you've latched onto, whether it's you know, advocating for a shelter program for homeless people, or if you're trying to cultivate a more engaged or inclusive school community locally, or if you you know, have issues with the healthcare system that you want to kind of you know, kind of enlist the support and aid of people. With an exercise like this, like Scott said, even if you're not a professionally trained graphic designer, you will come away with this with a proof of concept and a written statement that I could see someone, for instance, going into their community and finding someone with maybe design skills and saying, this is along the lines of what I'm thinking about. That gives a lot of direction to your creative collaborator at that point, that they can turn around and revise and kind of create something. I could easily imagine any of these projects people are talking about at this point going on into the world and becoming something. They can you know, they can be plastered on the buses in their towns, you know, or the stairwells of their schools, or where, what have you.
Yep, absolutely. I wonder, Ben, if you might talk a little bit about the level up assignment that's associated with this module.
Sure. Let me pull this up a little real quick so I have it for reference. But it's called the High Art Remix, and essentially, what it is asking for is for you to engage in a little bit of play. All our level up activities are voluntary. Well, I guess everything's voluntary, but
there's the openness.
yeah, exactly. But let me, where is it? Oh, here we are. Level up challenges, the High Art Remix. So remix, if you're not familiar with this term, is kind of a term or part of the ethos of digital composing in recent years. It basically is this acknowledgement that the things that exist on the internet are easily able to be modified and changed. And a lot of people have done that. You know, if you traffic in the world of memes, you probably have seen examples of remix. What we are asking for this is for you to take an example of high art, whether that's the Mona Lisa or the Statue of David or the Sistine Chapel or you know, or Munch's The Scream or Picasso's Guernica piece, and you're basically remixing it. You're adding elements. You're cutting and pasting visual elements from other text in there. You're modifying it in a certain way, but not just for the sake of graffiti. You know, the idea is that you're creating a statement with your remix. You're trying to generate some sort of parodic or satirical kind of take on the original. The idea behind this is that high art kind of reflects certain ideas, you know, about the place and time from which it originated, about the people for whom it was meant, whether they commissioned it or whether it was presented in a particular, you know, location. And you're kind of playing with that idea in a certain way. So if you go on to the site, you'll see a couple of examples. You know, there's Grant Wood's American Gothic, which has these, if you're familiar with the original, it has this couple. They're kind of world worn. They're kind of haggard and slim, and they kind of have stern faces. But the remix kind of fattens them up a little bit, which maybe is a reference to you know, the late American diet. There's one of the scream in the prompt. If you're familiar with Edvard Munch's The Scream, is this kind of iconic image of modernist angst. A figure is on a bridge, and there are these kind of figures in the background that are kind of advancing on this figure, and the figure is just in anguish, and is screaming, and the visuals kind of replicate this. The parody has replaced the face of the scream with what's known as the awesome face, which is kind of a smiley face with a really wide mouth, and so that kind of undercuts that kind of modernist existential dread by kind of being cutesy. So the idea is that you're playing with the language of the original and trying to undercut it in a particular way.
Yeah, and I think that I could very easily see, we've used this term high art. I think that that's a term that you should all feel free to define for yourself. I think that what people have produced that often gets held up as iconic art definitely changes from culture to culture and time to time. And so, but I think I would also say, don't let that piece of the assignment hang you up a little bit. If there's something that maybe is iconic, but not necessarily high art, and you really want to make a parody of it, go for it. This is a level up assignment. It's not necessarily nothing in the class is graded, but this is extra. It's an opportunity for you to play. I think that the one that, if we would think of, the one maybe here in the United States that we're seeing the most of lately is kind of remixing of the Statue of Liberty, changing of the text, changing of the expression, the way the Statue of Liberty is represented. So super iconic. It's obviously art. It's this massive, massive structure. But I think that would be something that you could easily play with if you wanted to do that also.
Right. And yeah, and there are opportunities in the world of photography, in the world of street art, in the world of posters for movies. There are lots of different genres you might think of. High art's just kind of a starting place, but yeah, like Scott said, this is an opportunity to play. It's an opportunity to rapid prototype, and essentially it's meme creation in a sense.
Ben, anything else on your mind? That's kind of gotten through my list of things that I wanted to bring up today.
I'm looking through my notes. I think we've touched on everything. Do you want to say anything about technology?
Oh, yeah, I think that, again, if the idea that this assignment is, obviously the course has a lot of material and everybody's pressed for time. If you're worried about technology itself, I can understand how that might be putting a little bit of extra pressure on you. I think that this is not an assignment where you should feel like I need to learn everything there is to know about a program like Photoshop. If you have a computer, you probably have somewhere on that computer a very user-friendly, low-tech application that will allow you to create some visual documents. So for example, I use Macintosh computers usually, and there's a program on there, if you look at, it's called Preview, and it's usually designed for me to look at pictures, but it has some very, very basic graphic tools on there that I can actually do some design work that would not take me a long time to figure out. So if you are sitting there thinking, I've always wanted that opportunity to learn Photoshop, or I've always wanted an opportunity to learn iMovie, this is a great invitation for you to take some time and see if you can learn that technology for this assignment. And at the same time, if you are really engaged by the assignment, but either don't have the time or are feeling a little anxiety about learning a new technology, go low tech, or maybe even go analog. I was talking about, like, what I might do is get out some construction material or some markers, and I might actually draw something, and then in the end, take a picture of it and create a digital artifact of what it is that I had created. And that would be perfectly appropriate for this assignment.
Yeah, ditto. We try to accommodate all sorts of skill sets and stuff. And the other thing I would suggest is that the assignment prompt links out to kind of alternatives to some of these kind of like high-end or professional grade options. So like, you know, Photoshop, at least under traditional model, was very expensive, and now it's under kind of a subscription model. But we have alternatives such as Pixlr and you know, others. But yeah, take this in the spirit of rapid prototyping. You're kind of creating a concept and providing a statement that kind of explains the concept that you know, in the end may go on to be something even better.
I also think I would emphasize that you do not need to start with a blank canvas in this assignment. There are a lot of free online programs that if you, you know, you could do a Google search of how to create a poster, and you'd probably find a lot of free online programs that have templates, which means that the basics of the design are already there. You might be able to change some colors, but there are fields on that template where you can plug in images or you can plug in text. There's no reason why you have to be staring at a blank canvas wondering where to start. There are ways out there where people have already got the starting place for you, and you can just plug in some information. Right.
What Aristotle called rhetoric the ability to discover the available means of persuasion. This is exactly that. You know, the web, if nothing else, is a massive stockpile of potential resources just waiting to be exploited. So go nuts.
Absolutely. I think that's all I have, Ben.
I'm good if you're good.
I'm good too. So everybody, good luck with the assignment. Keep posting the discussion forums. Send us messages if you have questions, but most of all, help each other. This is a community of learners here, and the more that the exchange is going on, the more learning and more excitement there is in the class, I think.
Yep.
All right. So long, everybody. Bye, Ben.
Bye-bye.
See you later.